Pissing off the base commander. When I was 20, I got drafted into the army. I live in the Netherlands. And this happened in the 80s. I got trained to be an ambulance driver. 2 months of general training in how to drive a Land Rover. And 2 months of medical training. After that, I was ready to take on any medical emergency that came my way. After my training, I got placed in a staff support platoon. A mismatch of different roles that are there to support the higher army staff in whatever they need. Make coffee, admin, drive them around, tech support, etc., etc. I was their ambulance driver. It was probably helpful when we were at war, but they had no use for me during peacetime. After I got settled on the base where I got stationed, I was called in by my lieutenant, telling me I had been volunteered to work at the small local military post on our base. I was okay with it, as it gave me something to do during the time I had to serve in the army. It was a small post with a clinic, 1 permanent doctor and 1 drafted right out of medical school, and several other grunts like me. Downstairs was our clinic and a few rooms to treat patients. Upstairs about 12 beds for patients who were sick, but not bad enough that they had to go to a real hospital. We worked at the clinic and took care of the patients upstairs. And maybe 23 times a week, I had to pull out with the ambulance we used, more often than not, for a planned trip to transport a patient to or from an actual hospital. I started with the rank of soldier, and I was expected to end my 1-year career at the rank of corporal. As you can imagine from the title, that never happened. I did not hate working at the post, on the contrary. I actually felt I did something useful, and while I was stationed at the post, I learned many practical medical skills, having other soldiers to practice on. But it was a waste of my time. I wanted to start my career in IT, and this was holding me back. I also did not care much about hierarchy or ranks. I respected my fellow army men and women for who they were, their actions, and how they treated others, not by the number of bars, stars or stripes. And being an actual medic on our base, I got away with that. We had no roll calls, and I slept in a 2-person bedroom instead of the 12-person one my platoon mates had to use. No inspections, no military training, and wearing white instead of green. Anyways, to the malicious compliance. I was tending to a patient at the clinic. He and his buddy had walked into a door, their words, and it had a glass window that shattered and cut them both up. One pretty bad, and he was treated by our doctor in one of the rooms as he needed quite a few stitches. I had to stay in the clinic, and as the other soldier only had minor cuts, I treated him on the spot, as no other medical staff was available at that time. The slightly larger cuts, I glued shut. For others, a band-aid would suffice. He was sitting in one of the chairs, and I was on one knee in front of him, taking care of a cut on his leg as I heard somebody walk into the clinic. Without looking up, as I was holding a glued cut together with my fingers until it had set, I politely asked to please have a seat and that I would be right there. "Colonel, do you know who I am? I am the base commander. Colonel so and so." Yes, he actually said that. I can still hear it in my head 35 years later. His booming, indignant voice, full of air of how important he was. I was not impressed at all, mostly annoyed by his attitude, and told him, "Congratulations. Please have a seat, and I will get to him once I have finished treating the cut I was working on." That was not what he wanted to hear, and he started chewing me out. Finally, I was done with the cut, let go of my fingers and got up. Ignoring his barrage, I asked him how I could help. "Colonel, I need to speak to the doctor. I have an appointment." "Okay, not an emergency." I explained to the colonel that the doctor was treating a patient who needed urgent medical attention, and that he will have to wait till the doctor finished his treatment. He has none of it and tells me he does not have the time to wait. Then he orders me to tell the doctor that his 3 p.m. appointment is waiting for him. I knew the doctor would drop everything and be running to the colonel if he got wind of who it was that was waiting for him. He did not have much of a spine, and his career was primarily based on the colonel's input and assessment of him. But the colonel had given me an order, and I had to do it. So I went to the treatment room and put my head in. The doctor was busy stitching up the more injured soldier, and I complied with the colonel's order. Me, doctor, your 3 p.m. appointment has arrived. The doctor, not realizing or remembering who the 3 p.m. appointment was, told me irritably to have the patient wait till he finished, and that it could be another 510 minutes. He repeated what he had told me several times before, to only disturb him for emergencies. I go back to the colonel and tell him that the doctor is still busy treating the patient and would be available in about 10 minutes. The colonel was not happy and told me to go get the doctor. Now, I told the colonel I had explicit instructions to only disturb the doctor in case of an emergency, and that his appointment was not an emergency. He would have to wait. He grumbled but, in the end, sat down till the doctor arrived, and he started berating the doctor about how precious his time was and how he had made him wait. The doctor apologized and almost groveled as they moved into the doctor's office. I had to go upstairs for something, and the colonel had already left after I got down. I did get a good ear-washing from the doctor telling me I should have mentioned to him that it was the colonel who was waiting for him. I argued that it should not matter who was waiting if he was treating a patient who was bleeding all over the place, and that he told me himself that he could only be disturbed for emergencies. I never got that promotion to corporal or even soldier first class. Still worth it. Oh boy, I feel that. Honestly, if you were there only for mandatory conscripted service, who cares if they promote you? I was drafted in 2001 in an Asian country, and the length of service is 2 years. Goes up to 2.5 if you get promoted to corporal along the way. I was 1 year 11 months in, crossing my fingers they would forget to promote me when the letter came along to the S1 office informing them of my impending promotion. I was so mad lol. Also loved the medical staff in my base. I learned early on that the people you wanted to really befriend and get on their good books are the medics in the med center, the mess boys in the cookhouse, and the RPs who guarded the camp. Did this by going around once a week on my breaks with free drinks for them. RPs would let me come and go from the camp as I pleased even though officially it's not allowed. Medics let me enter the medical center at night on the odd occasion I got put up for guard duty, and sleep in a spare bed. We were in Asia, in a country that regularly tops 32°C at night, so getting to sleep in an air-conditioned med center was much appreciated. They would even lock the doors to the medical center and alert us if the duty officer showed up, and let us out the back door before letting the duty officer in. If nothing else, my time in the army helped me learn who the real people to build relationships with are, and it's always those of us who are deemed nobodies. Explains why a colonel was commanding such a small base. His superiors probably didn't trust him with anything else. Totally feel you. I was a driver, ambulance too, for the main Air Force hospital of the country. The amount of docs and medical staff doing stuff like that to colonels and above was big, and every single event was funny, haha. When I was a radiology resident, our coordinator told us to not only respect our radiology techs, but defend them as well. In the middle of the night, I walked into the CT scanner to hear a surgery resident yelling at our tech. I called the surgery resident out of the room and told him that he can yell at me instead. He told me that he needed to talk to the tech, but the tech would look at him. The tech was focused on the patient on the table. Our techs were taught that even if it was a towel on the table, you focus on that until the study is done and the patient is in their bed. I told him that the tech was doing his job and that he didn't have the right or authority to yell at him. The surgeon tried to rebut, and started off saying, "Well, in my country." Whoa, buddy. Let's back up. We are not in your country. You're in ours. Yell at my tech one more time and we'll discuss it with my chairman and yours. It's easier to replace an average surgery resident than it is to replace a good CT tech. Back when I still lived in NL, I've met a couple ex-draft soldier types who took that attitude your colonel had into everyday civilian life. Fuck those idiots. I've never been in the military, but I would hope if I was, I would have the guts to do this. Great job. You did well. As an aside, in my experience, officers like that tend to come to a crashing, flaming halt in advancement once the real officers hear about how they treat their troops. Damn, I hate that kind of officers. Had the pleasure of dealing with one. How to drive a Land Rover. You had me at how to drive a Land Rover. I witnessed a similar experience a few years ago while I was still with my ex-military. Except mine was with both an officer and his wife. Background on my part is that I'd woken up in the middle of a colonoscopy because they hadn't told me they were using sedation instead of anesthesia. So afterward I went down to the patient relations office as soon as I was released and told them that when it was redone, it had to be under anesthesia. Cut to a month or two later, and it's about 6 or 6:30 in the morning. We've driven about 3,040 minutes to the base hospital, with me having just finished the prep. We get into the inner waiting room where there's a few people sitting around, including this older couple. The husband goes to the bathroom, and while he's in there a nurse comes out and asks for David. The woman asks if it's a certain last name. Let's say Berkowitz. I don't remember what it actually was. And the nurse responded that she didn't know how to pronounce it. So she felt just asking the first name would be best. Cue a mini tirade from the woman about how he was an admiral, and how dare the nurse not refer to him as his rank, etc. Keep in mind that it's extremely early in the morning and everyone in the room is exhausted and doesn't want to have to deal with this. Finally, the husband comes out of the bathroom, and the wife tells him what happened, to which he responds that he is to be referred to as last name Berkowitz, first name Admiral. A little while I was called back to get ready for the procedure, and we were talking with the specialist getting my IV in, etc. And he kind of laughed a bit and responded with, "Sounds like Ms. Johnson, she's a civilian nurse and absolutely does not give a rat's ass about stuff like that." You should cross-post this to military stories. Officers are taught to be entitled pricks from the beginning. Then they reinforce it at various staff schools. And God help you if you run into a service academy graduate. TLDR, but R, malicious compliance. I hate entitlement mentality, especially for higher-ranking officers. There is no excuse to demand that front-line service, whether medical, food service or transportation. As a retired military officer, it pains me when people of rank abuse their privileges because they think their time is more important than all the rest of the enlisted folks. The enlisted folks make our military great, and failing to acknowledge that makes these rank-heavy officers losers. I'm sorry, but an ambulance driver is not a grunt. Respect for you op. This type of people, like the colonel, are the ones who should be given any type of power or authority.
P. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.